Welcome to the Exam Study Expert Podcast, helping you ace your exams at school and university through the psychology of high performance and the science of studying smarter, not harder. It's my pleasure to introduce your host, the Cambridge-trained memory psychologist and exam success coach, William Wadsworth.
Hello and welcome to the Exam Study Expert Podcast and to the final instalment in our little three-part series on academic calm. Today we're welcoming Jennifer Keable to the podcast to talk about learning how to thrive after academic anxiety and imposter syndrome. Jennifer has her fair share of experience with these things herself, which she talks about on the show, as well as now working as a coach to help people overcome these sorts of issues. And she shares some of her top practical tips with us in the episode today. Without further ado, let's welcome Jennifer and get right into today's conversation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Keable, and I work with individuals and corporate teams to grab a hold of the reins on unmanaged stress and increase well-being. Because guess what? You don't need to choose between success and your well-being, whether that be physical or mental.
Tell me a little bit more about what you just said in terms of not having to choose between success and well-being. I think that's such an interesting concept. Tell me a little bit more.
Yes, absolutely. So it really starts from personal experience. So I burnt out for the first time at 19 years of age while I was a university student and also running a franchise at the same time. So for me, success was so deeply enrooted. I needed to be a success. And when I talk about success, I talk about especially in this business that I was building. And so I worked incredibly long days, 16-hour days, 6 days a week, going, until one day I no longer was able to go. My body was numb, my face was numb. All of these things began to happen. Well, fast forward again 7 years, and I continued to follow down the same path. This chasing external success, right? Where you're checking off all the boxes, doing all the to-do list items. And I remember just before that happening, hearing this little voice saying, Jennifer, you need to start taking care of yourself. You need to start taking care of yourself. And then the other voice on the other shoulder saying, you don't have time for that, right? You don't have time. When do you think you're going to fit that in? And so I just kept going. And again, I burnt out. This time, much harder. Now, that was a very deep, dark place that I went into that I didn't think I was even capable of experiencing. Life had always felt easy for me, right? Yes, I always had to work hard for my own money and work hard for my success in quotations. However, my mental health was always there. It was always an easy thing. It was easy to be optimistic and happy and positive until suddenly it wasn't. And so that brought me through a journey where I really had to take a look at success. And what would success look like if it actually felt good instead of something I would just chase? And so by redefining success, I was able to come to this realization that I don't need to choose one or the other, right? I had more success at that age, 7 years ago when I had burnt out. I had more success at that age than I thought I was ever going to have. So I'd achieved great things, but I was the least happy I had ever been. Since then, when I have redefined success, so taking that holistic approach, how can I be successful both personally, professionally, in my mind, in my body? That has allowed me to create a new version of success that actually feels good. It's not just something I'm chasing, but something I truly embody and get to enjoy the journey along the way.
So that's a fascinating story. And thank you for sharing. I guess my question is, when you're sort of talking about kind of redefining success, so that sounds like a really helpful thing to do. Where do we start with that? So, I mean, your 19-year-old self, trying to achieve great things, both academically and in your kind of business interests as well. And how do you kind of go about shifting probably some quite deep-rooted habits, both practically and kind of how you look at the world and see things? Where do you even kind of start with kind of going on that journey of transformation?
Absolutely. It really started with me getting serious with myself first and foremost. Like not avoiding that conversation with myself, not avoiding those hard messages, right? So that message that had come up before, hey, Jennifer, you need to start taking care of yourself, and then just ignoring that. So long as you continue to ignore your own internal voice, you're going to continue to suffer. Life isn't going to feel good. The voice exists for a reason. So first of all, it starts with listening to it. Second of all, it starts with, so now you're listening to it, you're not avoiding it, but it's getting darn clear. Are you ready to start doing things differently? Right? Are you willing to at least give it a try? And then sitting down, and I recommend grabbing a pen, grabbing a paper, and asking yourself, what would success look like? And what would it entail if it actually felt good? How could I thrive? And then write down all of the things. It doesn't have to, let it be messy. This isn't meant to look like an Instagram post, because any real change doesn't, my friends, right? So you're writing down the ideas just as quickly as they're coming to you. It doesn't even have to make sense, right? So what would allow you to thrive professionally? What would allow you to thrive as a student in your education? What would allow you to thrive as an individual from a physical standpoint? So what would allow your physical body to thrive? What would allow your mind to thrive? If you're religious or have spiritual practices, what would allow you to thrive in that aspects? What about your relationships, right? So you can almost create columns for each of these topics and then just jot down what would allow you to thrive in them. So if I were to bring it back to my own example to make it a little bit more tangible, for me, 7 years ago, I was working as a project manager full-time for a general contractor. I also had 2 boys under 3 years of age, right? So life was very busy. And I also, when I was creating my definition of success, or what allows me to thrive, I realized that one thing that allows me to thrive is being physically active with my body on a regular basis. But because I was so busy, in quotations here, I allowed that to slide out of my life because I believed I didn't have time. But if I'm neglecting something that allows me to thrive, then how am I ever going to do it without that? So, for example, that was one of it. I realized that I needed to slow down. I was going all of the time. No time to sit and think, rushing. I would even speed if I was doing errands, right? Even when I didn't have to be in a rush, I still was in a rush because that's where my mental capacity was at, my mental state. And so I began to get curious about meditation. That forced me to learn to sit and do nothing. And it wasn't for long periods of time, 15 minutes at a time. And at the beginning it was really hard because my value up to that point was in accomplishing, was to checking off the to-do list items. So at first it felt icky. It was like, gosh, how am I sitting here doing nothing and still being valuable as a human being? But sitting there doing nothing actually allowed me to be more productive in the things that I was trying to do after practicing it consistently. So to go back to your question there, William, it's figuring out what is your definition of success that will truly allow you to thrive, and looking at the different aspects of your life and getting crystal clear about those things. Then from there, it's okay. So what do I need to start doing? Do I need to start working out? Do I need to start getting up at 5 a.m.? Do I need to start setting boundaries? With who? With myself? Maybe with my partner, or maybe with my friends, my parents, my roommates? What do I need to stop doing? Maybe I need to stop staying up until 2 a.m. every morning if I want to get up at 6 a.m. and create and have the time to work out like I want. And then perhaps maybe what good habits do I already have that I need to continue doing? So I would say that's an expanded version of the first step that you need to take. What is your definition of success that will allow you to thrive? What do you need to start? What do you need to stop? And what do you need to continue doing to achieve that?
Fantastic. That's a really great starting point. So yeah, what allows me to thrive? What do I need to start? What do I need to stop to achieve that? I'm minded of a couple of examples of conversations I've had with my clients over the years. And an example was a gentleman of school age, and he told me he had a problem concentrating. So we had a conversation about to focus, and we were sort of exploring different things. And one of the things I started to explore was what your kind of sleep habits are, what your diary looks like. And he screen shared his calendar. And this is a lad in his teens, 16, 17, and he screen shared his calendar. And He'd got, his study routine, the different blocks for the different things he was aiming to do each day, the different sort of courses, planned right through till midnight. And then from kind of 5:30 in the morning the following day. And the answer at that point was obvious. Well, you don't have a concentration problem. You've got you've got a try to burn the candle for too many hours each day problem. And trying to kind of take that step, like, I think that, from my experience, and it sounds like you've got quite a similar philosophy, like sometimes the key to unlocking progress with that is a little bit like you were describing in your story. The time away is not time wasted. And you're talking about your meditation habit. It's not time wasted. It's not luxury time. That is the time you need in order to be at your most productive the rest of the time. It's not an either or thing. You're not choosing, as you said, between success and well-being. Investing the time in the well-being allows you to increase your success, not diminish it. So sometimes I describe this in terms of studying smarter, not harder. That's kind of our mantra, but people often hear it that way around. So studying smarter is about saving you time so you don't have to study as hard. But actually, I think that there's an important direction of causality the other way around as well. And if you study too hard, if you study too many hours, that takes away your ability to study effectively because you're exhausted, you're burned out, you can't concentrate.
Absolutely. I would agree with that so much. As someone as myself, I'm very in tune with my body. So I know when I'm at my peak, I know when I'm not, I know when something feels off, and I'm very aware of how my sleep affects my performance, right? I know the optimal hours I need to feel good each day. And when I don't get those hours, I'm sluggish. I'm not as good of mood. I'm not as good of energy. It's harder to focus. Even though I still can, it's harder to. So for those individuals that are maybe in school, that are doing studying, that are, going for long hours a day, or perhaps balancing both, going back to school and working full time. Yeah, it really is important to be able to provide your brain the proper rest. Like, I like to compare it to a battery, right? Like, we don't let our phone batteries just get down to zero. Like, we are making sure that we charge them regularly because we know that when they get below usually 15%, the phone automatically shuts down certain applications in the background to try and prevent the phone from slowing down too much. Because if it doesn't shut those down, your phone bogs down. Well, guess what? The human brain is exactly the same. It will subconsciously try and protect itself of its energy. And so it will slow down your processing. So if you really want to be effective, yes, you need to be aware of your optimal sleep, right? You need to create 2 minutes of breathing time between meetings, between classes, so that you don't just show up all frazzled, right? I used to be there. I was super anal about being on time for everything. Oh, gotta be on time, gotta be on time. But I would show up frazzled. And guess what? When you show up frazzled, either because you're running too quickly between things or you don't have a great amount of sleep, you're not performing or thinking at your peak. But if you just showed up, even if you were a minute late, but you showed up crystal clear because you provided yourself that space to just breathe, to just take a moment. Could you imagine how much more effectively and intentionally you could show up and perform?
Yeah, no, I think that's such a powerful way of looking at life. Great. So one other angle I wanted to touch on, Jennifer, was the kind of imposter syndrome angle, because I believe that was sort of quite an interlinked part of your burnout story in the past. So I wonder if you could just sort of talk to that angle a little bit.
Yeah. So I would say, and it's so interesting because would you have asked me previously if I've been a confident person? Well, if you've ever asked the people around me if I was a confident person in the past, they'd all say yes. But that's the thing, is that sometimes we become so good at hiding our own truth at our own detriment, right? So if I think back to when I burnt out 7 years ago, I burnt out. And as I'd mentioned, I found myself in a really dark place, and that I didn't mention it to the people that were closest to me, right? I didn't tell my mom, my sister, my best friend, the doctor. I didn't tell any of these people because I was afraid what the people who loved me the most would think about me. Like, I look back and I just think, oh my God, if only I realized that this has nothing to do with being good enough or not being good enough, being successful or not being successful, we all are going to experience some mental health challenge at some point in our life. It's just going to happen, right? It's going to look different for each one of us. And it isn't a reflection on your value or who you are, or if you're good enough to Sally or Joe or Bob or Steve or whatever. It says nothing about who you are. So that was not the first time I really came across it, but the first time as an adult that it really became obvious, I would say. But then even in my career, I remember I had a coworker who she really had a strong personality. And she came across as that person who I do know it all, right? This is what I am. And my initial years at that company, I believed it, right? I was like, oh my God, yeah, look up to her and she's got it all figured out. And oh my God, here I am over here, just trying to figure this out, too afraid to ask the questions and be vulnerable because I didn't already know it all.
Yeah.
Well, the truth is she wasn't any better than what I was. She may have had more experience, but she was not better. And experience doesn't mean that you're superior as an individual. It means that you get to share that information with others who are still learning and growing. In fact, we're all learning and growing. We're just at different stages along that chart. And so that was another time where imposter syndrome was really showing up. And then individuals in that company too, you would hear them sometimes talk down about other people. They had never said anything negative about me. Never. Only said the highest of things. My reviews were always like raving. But I questioned myself because I thought, if they say that about other people, what is being said about me? Am I experienced enough? Am I good enough to run this project? All of these things. And what I've realized with imposter syndrome is it actually says nothing about who you are as an individual or what you are capable of. The fact that you are feeling this, oh God, what if they know this about me? What if they know I'm not qualified enough, right? That it actually shows that you're in an environment where you're stretching, you're growing. Because if you were in an environment that was exactly where you're at or lower, you wouldn't feel that. So if you actually feel imposter syndrome or those negative thoughts at some point, I encourage the audience to actually hold on to that, to get curious about that and be like, ooh, how is this my opportunity to grow? What can I learn from it? How can I use it to positively serve me? And that's how you kind of spin imposter syndrome instead of taking you down to work for you.
That's such a nice reframe. Seeing that as a signal that, oh, this is a great growth opportunity. I think that's, I'm getting imposter syndrome, but oh gosh, this is a signal that I'm in a situation where I have this opportunity to grow and level up. Yeah, that's such a nice reframe. Wonderful. Well, look, I wonder if we could bring things full circle and just touch back with your 19-year-old self for a moment, Jennifer. If you had the opportunity to go back and talk to her, what would you most want her to know back then that you've learned along the road since?
I would want her to know that she is worthwhile, that she is a success, regardless of those outside metrics, and that other people's opinions does not change who I am, my value, or what I'm capable of.
Wonderful. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure to chat and so many useful takeaways. And thank you so much for sharing all the sort of practical ideas you have along the way, the importance of sleep, physical exercise, the kind of meditation practice you mentioned, the sort of journaling, thinking about how you're going to thrive, the reframe for imposter syndrome, so many great little action points to take away from this. Thank you so much for being so generous with your wisdom and your time. If anyone wants to kind of continue the conversation and find out a little bit more about you and the work you do, where should we go next?
Yes, absolutely. They can go to my website, jenniferkeable.com. So my last name is KEABLE.com. There's a wealth of information. I also have free resources available on there that you can download. And if you want to contact me, you can contact me through my website as well.
Outstanding. Well, Jennifer, thank you once again.
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate you, William.
Wasn't that wonderful? If you're feeling inspired, why not leave us a rating and a review in your podcast app? It would make our day. Thanks again for listening, and see you soon.